Three, two, one, here we go. RAINMAN'S Take podcast. Observations on the world we live in. My take on current events and other topics of interest. Also interviews with some really cool people. So let's get the conversation going. Hey everybody, it's the Rain Man coming at you with a raindrop this week. I wanted to touch on several news stories that were happening over the last couple of weeks. Just kind of give you my take on what's going on, and then we'll get back to our regular interviews next week. So wanted to touch on basically about five news issues or news items over the last couple of weeks that definitely caught my attention, and I felt like I wanted to just express my opinion about it. First and foremost is the Super Bowl 55. Was loved watching it. Loved the fact that we had the football season this year. I think they did a great job in spite of all of the extra things that we've had to deal with in terms of COVID-19. But being a football fan, I'm just really glad that they were able to make that happen as successfully as it was. And I thought the season was great in spite of all that. The fact that Tom Brady won his 7th is just awesome. And thinking back on one of my earlier raindrops early last year, I was talking about what was more important to the success of a franchise. Is it an individual like Tom Brady, or is it the system like the Patriots, the New England Patriots system that won 6 Super Bowls over the last 20 years? And obviously, it played out in real time, and the answer is it's actually Tom Brady. An individual can have the most impact on the success of a program. And at first, I said it was early on. I said it was the system. But just watching Tom Brady go into a brand new team, a brand new program, had to not only completely learn a new playbook and learn new players, but he was able to bring all of the things that make him successful, how he takes care of his body, how he prepares for games, film study, all of those sorts of things that makes him at the very top of his game. He was actually able to bring that along with a winning mentality, that self-confidence that we do things, if we stick to a process, that we're going to be successful down the road. And he was able to make that entire team and that entire organization buy in, and it worked. And this is a Buccaneer team that last year did not make the playoffs, and now they're Super Bowl champs. And the only difference was bringing in a guy like Brady, which in turn helped bring in several other key players for that team to make them the Super Bowl champs. So nothing but impressed with Brady. Obviously, as a New England Patriots fan, I loved the last 20 years when he was in New England, but you come to respect him more when you watch him do all those things in a brand new environment. So that's that in terms of who's more important, the GOAT or the system. As far as the post Super Bowl boat parade, I absolutely loved it. The fact that you watch him having just won 7 world championships, 5 Super Bowl MVP trophies, basically everybody's saying that he's the greatest of all time. And then you see him on the boat parade, just having a great time, letting his hair down, just seeing him actually act like a regular human being. Any one of us would have done the same thing in his position. So I thought it was refreshing to see that, because normally you think of those type of people as robots. And so I was glad that we were able to see a more human and a more lighthearted side of all of those guys, and especially Tom Brady. A couple things that I did find very interesting and quite frankly, crazy in a negative way. I just can't believe that this is the culture and this is the society that we live in. But there was a tweet chain after Brady won the Super Bowl, basically calling him a racist for winning the Super Bowl in February, which is Black History Month, having beaten a black quarterback. To me, this whole woke culture, this whole cancel culture, is gotten to the point of absurdity. And those particular tweets I found to be absurd, and it kind of makes me think a little bit more along that line, and that is there are certain companies out there that have that refuse to back down, that refuse to cow to the cancel culture and the mob, and thankfully, the intent to cancel them and the intent to boycott those particular companies, at least the companies that I'm thinking of, the Goya supermarket chain, and I believe My Pillow, who's currently going through it right now, it's having, as a matter of fact, it's having what seems like the opposite reaction, and that is Goya, when AOC in December publicly called for a boycott of the supermarket chain, they actually had one of their best months in terms of sales. So what that tells me, a couple things. One is if you don't allow it to get to you, if you resist it just a little bit, that facade of the cancel culture, the woke culture, that facade crumbles pretty quickly, almost like a bully. You know, the classic adage, how do you stop a bully? You punch him right in the face. And in this particular sense, you stand up to this cancel culture and this woke mob by not even paying attention to what they're saying on those tweets. And I think Tom Brady is famous for doing that, or notorious for doing that, depending on what side of his, whether you like him or not, which side of the fence you land on. But he just goes about his business and he doesn't let that stuff, because that stuff is all just background noise. And it's a shame, because there are a lot of other companies and a lot of other businesses and people who will kowtow and acquiesce to that cancel mob for fear of what that retribution might bring. And it's just nice to see individuals taking a courageous stand of doing nothing and just business as usual. And as it turns out, it's not as bad as some would have wanted it to be, or some would have believed it could be. So I thought that was very interesting that those type of tweets were out there. And I'm so glad that those don't get any additional thought by the people that they're actually targeting to try to negatively impact that individual. So that was a very frustrating byproduct of the Super Bowl. And it just kind of got me thinking about some of the other sort of social media issues that we've got currently going on in our society today. So, okay, number two is the news that came out about they showed that image of AOC comforting Congresswoman Tlaib as she broke down on the congressional floor when she was recalling the events of January 6th. That also goes with the interview, not an interview, but a Instagram post, or a post that AOC put on her website talking to all her supporters, where she talks about the trauma that she experienced during the January 6th situation at the Capitol. Obviously, I'm going to be walking a very tight rope here because everybody handles trauma differently. Everybody has had trauma. I've had trauma. What bothered me about those outbursts is, and it seems like it's only coming from that side of the aisle. Everything is just completely over emotionalized, and where I see that being a problem not only does it also bring about just off the wall comments that AOC made about, tweeting that essentially Senator Cruz, Ted Cruz, tried to have her murdered, or it was because of him that she was almost murdered on January 6th. Just completely off the wall, emotional responses that does not help anything. And as a matter of fact, I also think that it just makes the U.S. look weak. And again, I'm walking a very fine line here, but the idea that the most powerful country in the world and representatives of the most powerful government in the free world breaking down on the official record just does not sit well with me, and it just makes the U.S. It diminishes our view in the world, or our position in the world. That's my view. Counteract that with you name it, Scalise, when he was shot last year. You also have Rand Paul, who was violently attacked in his own backyard and sustained significant injuries. And then also last summer, when they were having that event in D.C. and the mob basically surrounded Rand Paul again, a very threatening situation there. You don't see them reacting emotionally on the official floor of the U.S. government. And I think my take is I want my leaders to be a little bit stronger than that. That's all I'm saying there. But that's what we're getting right now in today's world. Everything is emotional. Everything is cancel them because I don't agree with what they're saying. I can't listen to a dissenting voice. I just have a real big problem with that, especially at the highest levels of government. Number three, and this just occurred this past weekend. The Senate acquitted Trump on the second impeachment trial. All of the basically, I think with the exception of 6 senators, Republican senators, all voted to acquit him. So they weren't able to get the majority vote required to actually convict him of the second impeachment. What really, really bothered me about that is immediately after that, after Mitch McConnell had voted to acquit Trump, he basically went out and completely reversed his course and essentially just said Trump was guilty of doing all those things that we just acquitted him of. And this is beyond frustrating for me. And this is one of the main reasons why I started RAINMAN'S Take is you cannot trust either side. And the establishment, the establishment is both red and blue. There's no difference when you get to that upper level of government, the established government. All they're trying to do is remain in place. And so he is making these political calculations. Not only did we have to go through this circus again and this kabuki theater again last week, but it completely takes everybody's attention off of what else is going on, and those are all the executive orders that are being passed, and actually trying to come up with what actually happened on January 6th and answers. And the further we get away from January 6th and the more crazy political stunts that we have, it just muddies the water to the point where eventually it's not even really going to matter what happened, because ultimately the establishment got what it wanted, which was a reason to crack down on dissenting voices. And so that, to me, is a very, very dangerous and a very precarious situation. And it's just beyond frustrating that actually happened. Although I kind of had my gut was telling me that they were going to acquit him, but at some level they're going to try to censor him or whatever. I don't believe that there's anything there for potential criminal convictions like Mitch had mentioned, but it just, it was so frustrating to see that. And then at that point, you realize, and if you haven't already, you should realize that it really doesn't matter. The Democrat Republican argument that I have with people, that I have with my friends, the conversations that we have, really, it doesn't matter to the establishment. And when I mean the establishment, I mean not only established politicians, the establishment media, everybody who has a vested interest in keeping the status quo. And that is one of the main reasons why they've been trying to destroy Trump from the day he was elected. And that is, he was an outsider. He was outside of the status quo. Everybody wants to keep the gravy train going in DC, and he had the outsider mentality. He had the non-elite mentality, and there was no way that they were going to let him get away scot-free with his attempt to, like he had always said, to drain the swamp. And you can see just how powerful that establishment is, because he was ultimately unsuccessful in doing that. In my mind, and this is one of the main reasons why I was a supporter of his, is he at least, to anybody who is willing to look, at least lifted up the lid to let people know exactly what's going on in DC. And it brings me back to that very interesting interaction that he had with Mitch McConnell early on, when he got into the office and he was just going gangbusters to try to get things done. And essentially Mitch had to pull him aside and tried to attempt to explain to him that, hey, this is not how this government works. And in that, right there, in that instant, I just knew Mitch was part of the problem. Really, and this is another thing that's very frustrating to me, is it is not going to change anytime soon. For me personally, my take would be the first thing you do to at least try to change the way things are going is somehow set up term limits for Congress, so that you don't get these people who have been in Congress for 20, 30, 40 years. That is essentially a career politician, which is exactly what the founders did not want. So there is, everybody's in on it in my mind in DC, as we saw over the weekend, and nobody is willing to make the appropriate changes, because ultimately they would be changing themselves out of a job. And apparently right now it's a very lucrative position to be in the US government right now. So it's very, very frustrating to watch the news today. I go back to my original reason for wanting to do Rainman's Take, and that is, you cannot believe anything you are hearing or reading. Everything you hear or read needs to be through a prism of skepticism and cynicism, and you can't take these people for their word. They need to be challenged at every possible turn, because right now they're making a very concerted effort to batten down the hatches in DC so that the establishment remains. So anyway, that is 2 and 3. Number 4, during the impeachment trial, the Democratic managers that were running the prosecution in the mainstream media actually were doctoring evidence, videos and tweets, as well as promoting some false claims. And this one really caught my attention, because this is a pretty dangerous situation, regardless of what side of the aisle you are on. And I'll get into that in a second, but as a perfect example. So during the trial, they had some video of Trump's speech, and then of course the at the Capitol, but they edited out when he said a peaceful and patriotic march to the Capitol. He wanted a peaceful and patriotic, and they left that out. And true to form, that night I'm watching PBS NewsHour, and sure enough, they did the exact same thing. So if you're not watching, if that's all you watch, you'd never know that he actually said those words, peacefully and patriotically march to the Capitol. There was also evidence that they were tampering with tweets in order to make them fit the narrative and the timeline. And actually, as a matter of fact, and there was also a phone call, apparently a tweet of a phone call that Senator Lee basically called them out on the floor of the Senate, essentially called him a liar for promoting that that tweet in a false light, to the point where the Democratic impeachment manager actually had to admit that that's what he did and strike it from the record. So these are very well-known cases of them doctoring evidence and doctoring videos, tweets to make it fit a narrative. And that to me is a very dangerous precedent. One more thing. Early on, the New York Times had reported that Brian Raskin, the Capitol Hill police officer who died, I think he died the next day after everything was said and done and everything had calmed down. The New York Times actually reported that he died from being attacked by Trump supporters. Somebody hit him in the head with a fire extinguisher, and that eventually caused his death. Well, come to find out, that is not actually what happened. And as a matter of fact, the New York Times had to write to recant the story, and that actually came out yesterday on Valentine's Day, the 14th, where they said that, as a matter of fact, that actually did not occur. So the problem is that was a month in not only in the headlines, but also during the impeachment trial, that something was patently false. They are running with that as if it actually happened, all with the idea of promoting the narrative that this was just an insane, violent, chaotic situation. And as it turned out, Officer Sicknick did not get hit in the head. He actually texted one of his family members, I think it was his brother, that afternoon after everything had calmed down, kind of explaining what had gone on. And then over the course of the next 24 to 36 hours, he gets sick and then he ends up dying. Well, the body was immediately cremated. Nobody's heard of the autopsy, with the exception of the Capitol Police confirming that there was no blunt force trauma to his head. So there's all sorts of things that just raises all sorts of questions. Why were they promoting this? You can let your conspiracy mind run wild with that. In my view, those three issues, that is just it cannot happen in a society that's based on law and order. And Michael Vanderveen, who was one of Trump's attorneys, actually got in a big argument with CBS, and I believe her name was, let me see here where I have it down here, Maureen Marr, the host of the show that he was being interviewed on. Essentially, we got into an argument about, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that she didn't think it was that big of a deal that they modified that particular tweet, and because apparently it was a minor modification. It was a date and there was a blue mark. And what Vanderveen said, and I actually agree with this, he's like, it doesn't matter the size of the modification. They tampered with evidence to promote a narrative that would not have been as effective if that piece of information hadn't done that. Same goes with the video. So what really struck in my mind was the fact that not only the Democratic politicians, but the mainstream media had no problem with doing that. And that is, and I'm glad that Van der Veen got into that argument with her, because it doesn't matter how big or how small the infraction is, it's still an infraction, and that can't be allowed to happen. Now, before I go any further, both sides were accused of dirty tricks during this impeachment, and like I said earlier, I think it was kabuki theater to begin with, but and both sides are it can be argued that both sides are hypocrites. And the reason why I wanted to bring up RAINMAN'S take in this, again, I keep harping on this, is you can't just listen to one side of the argument, because there are always both sides of an argument. And if you only listen to one, you're not going to realize that there's a lot of things that particular side is leaving out to promote a certain narrative. So the only thing is, because the mainstream media controls the vast majority of information that's out there, if that's all you watch, then you're not going to know that that there's a lot of other things happening behind the scenes. And again, that's where I come in to say you have to be as informed as possible, because then you can actually see the hypocrisy spread out right in front of you. I mean, they're not trying to hide it at this point. So that's number 4. And then the final piece of news that I wanted to just comment on, and that's actually, it's now it's playing out now, and there hopefully will be some repercussions. But basically, New York Governor Cuomo got busted for covering up the numbers of the nursing home deaths during last year. And what happened was, it came to light, and I don't know how it got out there, but it was leaked. His chief of staff, Melissa DeRosa, was actually talking to some New York Democratic lawmakers, and she basically flat out said that they, in her words, they basically froze and essentially covered up those nursing home numbers. And the reason why they did it, and this is where it really bothers me, the reason why they did it is they were concerned that Trump was going to open a Department of Justice investigation into the nursing home deaths, and that Trump would turn that into a political football and use it against him somehow. And apparently many of those Democratic New York lawmakers were pissed at her, because they basically covered that up and then threw everybody else on the bus, because those were the lawmakers that actually had to go back to their constituents and try to explain what was going on. And what's crazy about this, and I'm very interested to see how this all plays out. According to some estimates, they reported only about 50% of the nursing home deaths. So there's a huge problem there. Again, it's politicians, if not illegal, completely unethical, and we have to hold these people accountable. And what's even more amazing about that particular situation with Cuomo is, if you remember, he got an Emmy for his press conferences. They were fawning over how great his press conferences were. And he also wrote a book about, what was the name? The book was, let me see, where is it here? Leadership During the Pandemic. And so it's par for the course. Again, like I said earlier, hypocrisy is just flat out. Anybody who wants to see it, it's out there for everybody to see. But you have to be informed, because if all you do is listen to the mainstream media, you most likely are not going to hear about this. This particular situation, it's got everybody pissed off. De Blasio is asking for an investigation into what's going on. I'm sure the parents, so I'm sure local New York news is just going crazy right now. But the bottom line is, he had the audacity to attempt to do that so politically he wouldn't look bad. So right there, it just goes to show you, all those pressers that he did, that he won the Emmy for, you just have to wonder how much of that was actually accurate. I mean, and again, so one last point about this, and then I'll close up. just happened just last week, I believe. He had the ball to who had asked the cover up. He basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, he basically said, "Who cares? Who cares? They're dead. They died. It doesn't matter where they died." So essentially, he pulled a Hillary Clinton. You remember back in the day after Benghazi, after that nightmare, 2 months later when Hillary was in front of Congress and she screamed at him saying, what at this point does it matter how they died? They're dead. The problem is that is completely deflecting from what the original intent for that hearing, and hopefully Cuomo's going to have a hearing where he has to explain his actions. But just saying that is complete crap, because it doesn't matter if it's a year later. You screwed up, you covered it up. We need to get to the bottom of it. And this defense or this deflection of who cares where and when and how they died, they're dead. That's the main problem. We got to, and then, they go off and start talking about COVID and what they're going to do about it. So I just bring these to your attention because they're just glaring pieces of news that kind of help me feel kind of good about why I'm doing RAINMAN'S Take. And again, it is, you can't trust one side. You have to get as much information. You have to go to as many sources as you can to kind of figure out what's going on. So again, in closing, everything is a narrative. And as long as you watch news or listen or read something, just know that that's out there, that there is a narrative that's being pushed. And apparently, most of these people that are pushing that narrative have no problem bending the information, bending the rules to make sure that their narrative is out there correctly. So at the end of the day, the reason why this is all being done, in my view, is more power and control is the objective. It's not necessarily trying to solve a problem or make things better. It's all about control. It's all about the appearance of control. And when the establishment, when our government, the establishment, when all of those entities, when they get more powerful, then the individual citizen gets weaker and smaller. And that's, I guess that's why I did RAINMAN'S Take, because the sovereign individual needs to make sure that the government is for the people, and then we'll go from there. So just close it out. Like I mentioned earlier, there's hypocrisy on both sides, and so you need to view both sides of an argument, because who's to say that one side or the other is right? And the more information you have, the better informed you're going to be, the better decisions you'll be able to make. And hopefully down the road, we find something as close to the truth about any situation as we can get. So anyway, that is it. Thank you very much for listening. This is the Rain Man. And if you're in the military, the police departments, fire departments, or first responders, if that's you out there, thank you very much for your service. Stay safe. This is the Rain Man. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching RAINMAN'S Take, observations on the world we live in. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow RAINMAN'S Take on Instagram at RAINMAN'S Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.